Independent oil and gas company Mart Resources enters into an arrangement agreement with Delta Oil. The subsidiary of Delta will acquire all issued and outstanding common shares of Mart Resources. Btva Fund Managers Limited will list the Btva Sector Series ETFs at the Nigerian Stock Exchange on October 21st. Barclays Bank plans to delist Nigerian bonds from its index due to the volatile foreign exchange and macroeconomic concerns of the country. This is also following JP Morgan's announcement. Hello, you are watching Btva's Business Nigeria. I am Tunji Andrew, your host for the show. And on today's show, we go from the poor performance of the all-share index last week, shared in 1.1%, to the news of Delta Oil's agreement with independent oil and gas company Mart Resources. We also set an agenda for Nigeria's economy going forward, provided that the Minister for Finance and the Economy is announced soon, of course. Let's kick off with the equities market. Tosi, give us an update of all that has happened in the last couple of hours.
Tunji, the market closed positively today. The all-share index gained 1.3% to close at 30,219 points. It also narrowed the year-to-date losses to 12.18%. The high that we saw in today's markets is higher than what we saw last week Monday. It closed at 30,231 points last week Monday, and we're currently sitting on 30,219 points. If it follows in this trajectory, we hope to have a higher index before the year closes. There was an active distribution across the sector, that is the financial sector, the oil and gas sector, and the consumer goods. Speaking about oil and gas, let's give it a look. The oil and gas gained 0.92%. This is slightly lower than the gain that we saw in the benchmark index. There was choppy trades across this region. Owando has been on a steady decline. It's currently trading at 9 naira 20 kobo, which is very close to his year low of 9 naira. Forte Oil, on the other hand, has been on a steady climb. Forte Oil gained 20% in the past 1 month. It released its results on Friday. Revenue down by about 25%, profit after tax up by about 6%. I mean, let's see how the investors respond to that. Mobile gained 6% in the past 1 month. It also was one of the key drivers of the trade today. We believe that the traders are positioning themselves in that market if Mobile was to repeat its performance in the third quarter like it did in the second quarter. Now, over to the industrial sector. Best performing stock today was Dangote Cement. Dangote Cement gained 4.9%. Considering Dangote Cement contributes over 28% of the market capitalization, when Dangote sneezes, the market moves. It's over to you, Tunji.
Thanks, Tosi. Good to see the market picking up from the over 1% loss last week. Just in a bit, we will discuss the details of the deal between independent oil and gas company Mart Resources and Delta Oil with EcoBank's research head of energy research, Dolapo Oni. He'll be here with us on the show. Do not go anywhere. Independent oil and gas company Mart Resources enters into an arrangement agreement with Delta Oil. The subsidiary of Delta will acquire all issued and outstanding common shares of Mart Resources. Each Mart shareholder will receive 35 Canadian dollars, 35 Canadian cents actually, for every Mart common share. We have Dolapo Oni. He's with EcoBank Capital, and he's going to be speaking to us about this deal today. Welcome to the show, Dolapo.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, let's start with the fact that I mean, I had to do a bit of research on Mat Resources and then Delta. But let's start with Mat Resources. Who is Mat Resources?
Okay, basically, Mat Resources came into Nigeria as one of the technical partners to one of the marginal field operators, Midwestern Oil, who was assigned a stake in Umusadege field. I think that's on OML 110 or 118 or something. Can't be quite sure. So Umusadege field was one of the marginal fields, and the idea was that they were going to assist the marginal field operator Midwestern to actually ramp up production on that field up to a certain level. But that didn't happen as planned. So I think they got into that arrangement in mind that was going to take a couple of years. It ended up taking close to about another, this is counting 11, 12 years now.
So the sale is part of the plan?
So the sale, to me, the sale is part of the plan because the initial plan was that Midwestern was going to take them out at some point. And we saw that transaction began last year where they started talking about taking out Mat's stake in all the Midwestern fields. Don't forget, they also came together, they acquired OML 18 from Shell, a deal which actually concluded this year. So that I think that sort of delayed this exit from happening a bit. But the idea was that after that was concluded, Midwestern was going to take them out on both OML 18 and Umusadege field. But, I mean, the oil price went the way it went.
So I may need to check my research powers, for instance, because I've been searching for Delta. I mean, I've gone to the internet, I've checked everywhere, and I can't find who Delta is. I mean, there's talk about their affiliations, but there's really not much news about who they are.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't help you either, too, because, because there's really nothing to say on Delta. Apart from the fact that it was set up as a Saudi Arabian company last year, and then they set up a Nigerian subsidiary, and this Nigerian subsidiary is the one acquiring Mat Resources. So it looks like the typical, investor trying to take a play on the Nigerian market. So I think maybe for tax reasons, first of all, set up in Saudi Arabia, and then they're coming into Nigeria where their real attention really is, where they really want to, take some risk. So that's why I see that. That's why I see Delta Oil. Again, because there's really not much information about the management or who these particular investors are.
So you don't even know where their direction is.
Exactly. But what I expect is, now that they're going to this transaction, they're going to have to provide a lot more information to the shareholders.
True.
Because I imagine for the shareholders to be happy to actually take this offer or whatever they've put on the table, they will need to provide some more information about themselves, and I think that would be very key.
So looking at a company like Delta, why would you, well, for instance, if you were Delta, why would you want to buy Mat Resources?
No, honestly, Nigeria is still where you want to be. I mean, if you look across West Africa or even Sub-Saharan Africa, if you're looking for a region where you can just go and buy 2P reserves, it's really Nigeria. It's still Nigeria. You can't, it's not that easy to go into pretty much any other country in West Africa and just buy 2P reserves. In Ghana, you'd have to be going into the Jubilee fields or the 10 fields belonging to Tulo. In pretty much Angola, you'd have to be going pretty much very offshore where it's very high cost. But in Nigeria, you get an access to a field that, number one, this is a shallow water field. This is a field that is linked to, sorry, it's an onshore field rather. This is a field that is also linked to Forcados, one of the major crude streams. So there's a steady market supply for it. So, and then they build capacity over time. You're coming into OML 18 also, which has a very rich mix of both gas and oil. So there's some potential here, which with the right amount of capital to deploy, you can actually maximize here.
Well, Dolakwa, thank you, because we're going to still hold you back in a bit, because we're still going to be talking about Forte Oil's results which just came out, and we're also going to be getting Boyega also with us to run us through the numbers. It just came out recently, and we're going to be looking through all of that. Do not go anywhere. We'll be going on a short break, and we'll be returning very soon. Still looking at the oil and gas space. Forte Oil released its third quarter earnings with a 25.3% decline in revenue year on year. Boyega Olatide, BTVA's head of research, he has been digging into the numbers and going to be telling us all about it. Boyega, what exactly happened to Forte Oil?
Thank you, Tunji. Forte Oil released its numbers on Friday. Now, those numbers basically showed a 25.3% drop in revenues, but PBT came in fairly strong at what? Slightly less than 2%. Now, what was largely responsible for the fact that PBT did not drop substantially despite the 25% decline in revenues was the greater contribution of Geregu to the overall profitability of the company. The management had previously given guidance over the second quarter that Geregu is responsible for a greater proportion of the PBT, as much as 56%, while contributing as little as 8% in overall revenues. So what we've seen is the fact that Geregu is contributing more. However, revenues are dropping. But the surprising thing also is the EPS numbers that we were given basically still showed growth year on year. Now, the curious thing about Owando is we've seen substantial movements in price action based on the fact that they announced the deal with Mercuria. Now, as we all know, Mercuria is arguably the third largest trading company in the world. They intend to acquire about 17% of FO's equity for a valuation of about 200 million naira. Now, that deal in itself is the second deal we've seen this year. The first one being the Vital and Helios acquisition of about 49% equity in Owando Downstream, which was valued at about 276.8 million US dollars. Price action that we've seen after the deal, FO has outperformed the index. That's the oil and gas index. It's been the best performer in the index. It's outperformed the index. It's at about 12%. It's about 12% from the date of the announcement of the deal, whilst the index is about 2.4%. Against the other oil majors, it's also outperformed all the other oil majors, with it performing 12%. The best performer after that within that sector is Mobil, whereas Owando is the worst, then Seplat, then Total. Conol and MRS are flat.
You've seen the numbers, and one thing that struck my mind was the fact that you saw that revenue declined, but profit before tax went up.
Yeah.
How do you have profit go up with revenue going down? Explain that to us.
Okay, now, first of all, what you've seen in that particular sector is that the downstream oil and gas sector is a high-volume, low-margin business. Now, FO basically realized that a few years ago, about 2012 or 2013. So what they decided to do was to diversify their income streams. They did this by buying they set up an SPV, which owns about 53% in Amperium Power, which owns the Geregu plant. Now, that Geregu plant, as the management has given us guidance, is contributing about 56% of profit before tax. So what you now have is a situation where revenues from the downstream business is declining, but because you're seeing a greater contribution from Geregu, their overall bottom line is not declining by so much. So if they get that proportion of, which is the downstream proportion of the business, right, what we saw also in the numbers, and a detailed analysis of the numbers would show you, is that net finance costs dropped year on year by about 74%. You also saw the fact that other income rose by about they didn't give guidance as to what other income was. We can only speculate that it's either one, income streams from the Geregu plant, or two, subsidy reimbursements. But based on what we've seen from other oil majors, we would assume that that spike that we saw, which went from about 845 million to about 2.6 billion, could have been subsidy reimbursements. So that's why you're seeing.
Thanks for that analysis, Boyega. Basically, we'll continue to follow that Forte Oil story. Do not go away, because when we do return, we'll still be talking with Dolakwa Oni. We'll be talking about the Forte Oil's earnings, and we'll be going deeper into it. Do not go anywhere. This is Business Nigeria. Welcome back. You're still watching BTVA's Business Nigeria, and I still have Dolapo Oni, Ecobank Capital's head of energy, and he's going to be talking to us about all things Forte Oil. First thoughts on my mind, Dolapo, other income. That sounds very, very vague.
Yeah.
What exactly does other income mean?
And we've seen a lot of it this year with the downstream
is claiming other
operators.
income.
Yeah, it varies. And in Forte Oil's case, similar to what Btva has actually alluded to, number one, subsidy payments was possibly part of that. I believe to some extent subsidy payment may have been a significant chunk of that, because don't forget, when the new government came in, that was, and it took them a couple of months, first of all, before they decided to face the issue of fuel scarcity. So around July, thereabout, which we're already into the third quarter then, before they started saying, okay, we need to pay some money to these guys. And they paid some money. According to the Senate hearing, which we had later on, we learned that they had spent about 220 billion naira in payments to the oil marketers for subsidy. So some of that definitely went to Forte Oil as well in payments. We also knew that Forte Oil also recorded some rental income, some investment, some returns on investments they made into some investment property, some of which they disposed of in the second quarter, but some of which they still had, which they made some income on. So we believe that must have formed the other income.
But 250 though, is it worth it?
250 naira.
Yeah.
Well, you know, like I said, and like we keep saying, currently about 280 naira in the market. The fact is, analysts or market traders tend to often have maybe a different view to what analysts have, because if you look at most of the analysts that are covering this particular stock, there's a bit of there's about at current roughly about 66% difference between the average analyst valuation for Forte Oil and what the market is currently pricing it as. I think to some extent, the market is already looking forward into the fact that the money that's coming from the Mercuria deal will go into reducing their leverage, because that's a significant sore point for a lot of analysts looking at the market, looking at Forte Oil. The numbers are not very good. The company is not generating enough cash flow to actually service its debts regularly. So if you look at the numbers, it's roughly around, last time I checked, was roughly around 53% of the cash flows that was coming in, and the cash flow relative to the debt. That cash flow to debt ratio was about 0.53. All
right, thank you very much, Dolapo, for being with us on the show. It's been a great time having you with us on the show. That's Dolapo Oni, Ecobank Capital's head of research, and he's been talking to us everything oil and gas. Well, the Naira sheds 0.1% to close at 199 Naira 5 kobo against the greenback. More on the money market and the Nigerian bond market in a short bit. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back for an update on the Naira and the bond market. Btva Olatide is with us. How exactly do the markets fare today?
Well, basically, Tunji, before we do how it fared today, let's just do a slight recap of how it traded last week. Now, net liquidity at the end of the week closed at 962.14 billion. We saw automobiles likely to be redeemed during the course of the week, which boosted existing liquidity. Today, however, the money market rose marginally. Regarding currencies, we saw a situation where the oil majors are not still currently participating actively in the market, with the exception of Shell that participated last week and added some type of foreign exchange liquidity to the market. We haven't seen participation from any of the oil majors.
But does this at all have anything to do with Barclays Bank's plan to delist Nigerian bonds from its index?
I don't think so, Tunji. Basically, what you have is a situation where one index provider basically gives some type of warning regarding a purported exclusion from the index. What you have across board is foreign portfolio investors basically looking at their exposure to that country or that institution and gradually trimming down their weighting of that particular country. So as we've seen a lot of FPIs exit Nigeria based on the JP Morgan's exclusion of Nigeria, we would likely have seen exposure being reduced across board in the Barclays Index also.
But what's your take on the volatile state of the foreign exchange as well as the macroeconomic concerns?
It's likely going to continue for some time, and the reason being is simply this: 70% of our budgeted revenue is forex related and comes from the sale of oil. 90% of your forex earnings come from oil. So as long as you have instability or some type of volatility in oil price, and you haven't sorted some of your macroeconomic concerns like infrastructure, power, you would still have those challenges.
Thank you very much, Boyega. After the break, Ugodre Obichukwu talks to us as we set an agenda for the incoming Minister of Economy and Finance. Probably do not go anywhere.
New Cadbury Dairy Milk, Ritz and Lou.
Well, Nigeria's debt profile is currently at $63.06 billion in net. Unemployment rate has dropped by over 30%. That's between first quarter and second quarter of 2015. You can definitely say that the incoming Minister of Economy, which is usually the also Minister of Finance, will have a lot on their hands going into the new administration. I'm joined in the studio now by Ugodre Obichukwu, who's the publisher of nairametrics.com. Ugodre, thank you for joining us in the studio. The thought on my mind is debt to GDP, 12%. Nigeria's exports, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the list are oil and gas related, making up about 86% of the total exports of Nigeria. We see inflation going up every day, going close to that double-digit figure. Unemployment is going down. Revenue is dwindling.
Going down or going up?
Unemployment is going up. Revenue is going down. I mean, the indices just don't look good. For the incoming Minister of Finance, what basically would be the skill sets? What kind of person would be needed to turn Nigeria around?
In your role of painting a gloomy picture, you missed out the stock market because that's also
also index under 30K.
13% or so down this year to date. The minister, whoever he or she is, because we actually don't know yet, has his work cut out. But to me, I think the first thing that I see myself saying she, you know, I sort of have this feeling it's probably going to be a she. Anyway, so whoever the minister is, so permit me if I say she, anyway, whoever the minister is, I think the first thing is you have an economy that has stagflation staring at it, right? Yeah. So you have GDP growth rate, you know, dropping, and then I think we've had two quarters now,
back
negative
to back
growth rate. I mean, if we hit another negative growth this quarter, then we're probably officially in a recession. So, and then you also have inflation, you know, going up as well. So no economy can actually survive, you know, and like consistently, you know, for that long. So to me, the first thing she probably want to do is, you know, get her team together and figure out how to inject, you know, badly needed stimulus into the economy. Currently, the CBN has been doing that. As you've noticed, this year has been, I mean, we've had about 9 months of, you know, zero impact from, you know, from the fiscal side of things. So it's basically the CBN monetary policy that's basically been driving this economy. And that's why you've been seeing all sorts of policy somersaults here and there, all because the CBN governor feels that he needs to fill a vacuum that, you know, that
is not being met by the fiscal side.
So I guess he or she we probably have to take up that mantle, and that's probably the first thing that they will have to look at. They're probably going to look at areas in the economy where stimulus is badly needed. For example, the real sector, you know, they're crushing on the
True.
On high debt. That's if they even get to see any bank to lend them money. The consumer sector is undergoing serious pressure. Sales has been down. I mean, you've seen some of the results that have been out already.
Real
results
bad, real bad.
I mean, we saw Cadbury 98% drop in profits, and you're seeing that across board, not just Cadbury. So people don't have money, so you have to stimulate the economy.
Talking about stimulating the economy, how is she going to do? Well, you've infected me with a she. How is this person going to stimulate the economy? We saw what Godwin Emefiele did with cutting CRR from 31 to 25%. That injected some level of liquidity. But going forward, looking at the gloomy outlook of the economy, the world at large, China, USA, Europe, everybody looking bad. We need a lot more liquidity. How is she going to get that liquidity?
Well, I think there are two things that he or she needs to do. And I mean, they probably need to come out and explain to us clearly how they're going to go about it. But two things. First is you need to, we have a little buffer, and the buffer is that debt to GDP is still about 12%, which is quite low, right? I mean, before the rebasing, I think we were about 25%, so we can actually still get up to 25% in debt to GDP. So if you're going to inject stimulus into an economy, your first source of revenue first source of stimulus will probably be from debt, right? And then the second source of funding or stimulus that they can also get is from taxation. Yeah, currently we're probably about, I hope I'm not mistaken, but about 10% of our GDP. I think we collect about 4 or 5 trillion. 5 trillion to about 90 trillion.
90
I mean,
trillion,
so that's even less than 6-7% of our GDP. That's what we get from taxes. So she has to come up with a radical plan, a plan that actually makes sense. Because what we have is people are crying of multiple taxation. So we're not saying you need to come and start increasing taxes.
We just need to
what you need to do is
tax
broaden the base, right? So you have fewer people paying taxes. So look for a way to
expand the tax net.
And I think the federal government actually, that's one area where they're focusing on. That's probably why they got the former Lagos State.
Thank you very much, Ugodre, because we really can't go into a lot of it because I would have loved to ask a lot of more questions, but we're going to bring you into the studio again with us to talk about all these things, economy, especially when we do finally know if it's a he or a she. Stay with us.
You want to take a bet?
Stay with us, Ugodre, as we check who the biggest gainers in the equity space are. Last week, we saw Okomu Oil, Mansard Insurance, Forte Oil, and Zenith Bank leading that space. Tosi, did they persist this week?
No, Tunji, none of those stocks you mentioned is on my best performing stocks for the week. What I have here are Dangote Cement at 4.93%, Beggar Paint at 4.92%, Honeywell Flour at 4.71%, Mobile Nigeria at 4.05%. No, I'm not surprised about that. And Champion Breweries at 3.37%. While topping my losers chart at Transnationwide Express at 7.08%, NASCON at 6.86%, Wema Bank at 5%, RT Briscoe at 5%, and Evans Medical at 4.92%. Now let's start with the top losers. Looking at that list, the top 10 losers, 3 of them come from the financial sector. One would have thought that after the CRR rate was dropped from 31% to 25%, we will see a better performance in that sector. However, it has been quite tepid. Now that we're expecting the Q3 results to hit us soon, we hope that those stocks will actually pick up. Now, back to my top gainers, we have Dangote Cement topping that list. And we all know Dangote is a key market capitalized stock on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. So whenever that stock moves, it's most likely it pulls up the benchmark index. Dangote Cement has been setting up new plants across 16 African countries. In April, it launched its plant in Zambia that produces 1.5 million metric tons. Likewise, in Ethiopia, it launched about 2 weeks ago another plant that produces 2.5 million tons. For the very first time, it challenged Lafarge, its key competitors, when it launched its plant in Zambia, and the the production is currently more than Lafarge's 2 existing factories combined. I believe the traders and investors are positioning in that stock for the long-term growth. That is it from me, Tunji.
Thanks, Tosi. So, Ugodre, how do you interpret the market these days? Buy, sell, hold, where exactly is your money?
Well, my money is in the market. If you are a savvy investor, like some of us are, then you want to be in the market. Of course, it all depends on which side of the investor type you are. You're a fundamental investor, or you're more into technical analysis. So if you're into fundamental investing, which is long-term investing, then you want to be in the market now, right? Because there are a lot of stocks that you can cherry pick from. And then if you're also into technical analysis, then you also want to be in the market now, because the market is experiencing a whole lot of volatility.
Thank you very much, Ugodre, for being with us on the show. We really appreciate you. That is Ugodre, the publisher of nairametrics.com. Thank you very much, both, for being with us on Business Nigeria today. It's been a wrap. And on the show, we will be back tomorrow giving you market and economic updates that is precise. Till same time, same station tomorrow. My name is Tunji Andrews, and you can always follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @TunjiAndrews. Till tomorrow, stay safe.